My name's Mildred McMillan, and I'm what you might call enthusiastic about birds. Not just a casual, "Oh, a robin," kind of enthusiast, no. I'm talking full-blown, early morning tweet listening, binoculars always at the ready, bird bath cleaning on Sundays kind of enthusiast. My backyard, you see, is less a garden and more a five-star avian resort. Think lush greenery, a babbling brook, okay, it's a slightly leaky garden hose, but it works, and the piece de resistance. The Grand Buffet, my magnificent bird feeder. This isn't just any bird feeder, mind you. Oh no, this is a handcrafted masterpiece, a Victorian-era-inspired feeder of such exquisite design it's practically a tiny bird-sized Buckingham Palace. It's a thing of beauty, attracting a kaleidoscope of feathered friends. Sassy bluejays, haughty cardinals, fluffy chickadees, and even the occasional bewildered pigeon, who seems utterly perplexed by its own elegance. Watching them flit and flutter, pecking away at sunflower seeds and suet, brings me a joy that surpasses all understanding. It's a daily symphony of chirps, cheeps, and the occasional indignant squawk, a soundtrack to my peaceful, bird-filled existence. It's a tranquil paradise, a haven of feathered friends, well, you get the picture. It's utterly delightful. And then, the HOA happened. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is just the beginning of my tale, a tale of feathered fury, bureaucratic battles, and a revenge so sweet, it'll make even the most discerning cardinal chirp with delight. You see, this idyllic paradise, this haven of avian bliss, was about to become the unlikely battleground in a war against, well, let's just call them the feather-hating faction. And that, my friends, is where the real fun begins. So there I was, happily tending to my feathered friends, refilling the Grand Buffet with the finest sunflower seeds money could buy, when disaster struck. A crisp, official-looking envelope arrived, bearing the dreaded insignia of the Homeowners Association, or HOA as they're known, those guardians of suburban conformity, the arbiters of lawn-mowing etiquette, and, as I was about to discover, the sworn enemies of all things avian. Inside, nestled amongst the legalese and threatening fonts, was a fine. A fine! For my bird feeder. Apparently, the Grand Buffet, that architectural marvel of bird-feeding technology, violated Section 3, Subsection B, Paragraph 7, Subparagraph 2.4 of the HOA bylaws, which, if I understood correctly, prohibited anything remotely resembling joy or natural beauty within a 10-foot radius of my property line. I nearly choked on my chamomile tea. A fine? For attracting birds? It was ludicrous. Absolutely preposterous. I mean, what kind of dystopian nightmare had I accidentally stumbled into? Had I somehow wandered onto the set of a particularly absurd sitcom? The letter went on to explain, in excruciating detail, that my bird feeder was an eyesore, a potential hazard, to whom, exactly, I couldn't fathom, and a clear violation of the HOA's unwavering commitment to, well, I still don't know what they were committed to, but it certainly wasn't happiness or biodiversity. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated nerve of these people. I considered appealing, of course, but the thought of actually engaging with the HOA's bureaucratic labyrinth felt like a descent into madness. So, I did what any self-respecting bird lover would do. I stewed, I simmered, and I hatched a plan. A plan so brilliantly audacious, so delightfully subversive, that it would make even the most seasoned robin blush. This wasn't just about a bird feeder anymore. It was about principle. It was about the right to enjoy the simple pleasures of life, the right to share your backyard with nature's delightful creatures, and the right to not be hassled by a bunch of, well, you get the picture. The war had begun. Naturally, ignoring the first fine was a tactical error. It was like poking a sleeping bear with a particularly chirpy twig. The HOA, it turned out, was not a creature to be trifled with. Soon, my mailbox became a repository of increasingly aggressive letters, each one more threatening and ridiculously formal than the last. The fines escalated, too, each one a small but significant dent in my already depleted sense of humor. Apparently, my blatant disregard for their draconian bylaws had unleashed their full bureaucratic wrath. It was a war of attrition, a battle of wills waged with stationary and increasingly alarming legal jargon. Then came the fateful encounter. I was happily pruning my prize-winning roses, ironic, given the circumstances, when a figure emerged from the shadows, a vision of perfectly coiffed hair and simmering resentment. This, my friends, was Karen, the HOA president, a woman whose dedication to rules surpassed even the most zealous of librarians. She materialized beside me, like a particularly judgmental garden gnome, her eyes narrowed like a hawk's. The irony, again, was not lost on me. "The bird feeder," she declared, her voice laced with the venom of 1,000 unjustly fined homeowners. "It must go." I, ever the diplomat, simply smiled and offered her a freshly baked blueberry muffin. A small act of rebellion, perhaps, but one that perfectly encapsulated the absurdity of the situation. She eyed the muffin with suspicion, then me with even greater suspicion. This wasn't going to be a quick chat, I realized. This was going to be a standoff. A battle of wills, fought not with weapons, but with baked goods and unwavering determination. The air crackled with tension, the scent of freshly baked blueberries somehow adding to the absurdity of it all. Clearly, I needed to up my game. The muffins were nice, but I needed something more impactful. Something that would speak volumes without uttering a single word. Something truly memorable. And that, my friends, is where the forest comes into play. Let me tell you, fighting with your HOA over birdseed is not a recommended weekend activity. It's surprisingly stressful. The constant barrage of letters, the escalating fines, the sheer absurdity of it all, it gnawed at me, chipped away at my usually sunny disposition. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, visions of Karen's perfectly coiffed hair dancing in my head like malevolent fairies. My dreams were filled with endless paperwork, suffocating bylaws, and an army of miniature Karens armed with tiny pruning shears and even tinier fines. It wasn't just the money, although that certainly stung. It was the principle of the thing, the sheer injustice of it all. Here I was, trying to create a little haven of natural beauty, attracting birds and bees and butterflies, and they were trying to shut it down. It felt like a personal attack on my very soul. My carefully cultivated garden, my sanctuary of peace and quiet, had become a battleground. A battleground over birdseed. The irony was almost too much to bear. I mean, really? We're fighting over birdseed? What had the world come to? Was this some twisted parody of suburban life? A Kafkaesque nightmare disguised as a quiet cul-de-sac? The frustration bubbled inside me, a simmering volcano of righteous indignation. I considered writing a strongly worded letter, a truly epic missive filled with witty barbs and pointed sarcasm. But then, I realized that would just feed the beast. I needed a solution, something more creative. Something that would not only address the immediate problem, but also send a message. A message that would echo through the manicured lawns and perfectly aligned hedges of my neighborhood. A message that would resonate with the birds, the bees, and even the most uptight of homeowners. A message that would say, loud and clear, "You mess with my birds, you mess with me." And that's when I decided to take matters into my own, well, let's just say very feathery hands. Now, I know what you're thinking. Buying a forest to outsmart your HOA seems a tad excessive. A touch unconventional. Perhaps even slightly unhinged. And you'd be right. It was, by all accounts, a completely bonkers idea. But hear me out. It was also, in its own delightfully absurd way, utterly brilliant. The seed of the idea, so to speak, was planted during one of my many frustrated walks. I was pacing, muttering about bylaws and birdseed, when I noticed it, for sale. Sign nestled amongst the trees at the edge of the neighborhood. A large tract of woodland, bordering directly onto my property. It was a sprawling, magnificent forest, teeming with wildlife, a veritable paradise for birds. And it was for sale. A tiny, insignificant voice whispered in my ear, a voice usually drowned out by the incessant chirping of my feathered friends, but this time it was clear as a bell. It said, "Buy it." The thought initially struck me as ludicrous. Absolutely, undeniably, pant-sweatingly ridiculous. But the more I thought about it, the more the idea began to take root. It was a radical solution, a bold stroke of genius, a plan so audacious, so utterly outlandish, it just might work. Imagine it, me, Mildred Macmillan, owner of a private forest, a verdant kingdom teeming with birds, a sanctuary safe from the clutches of the HOA. The sheer audacity of it all filled me with a giddy thrill. I could almost taste victory, the sweet nectar of revenge mingling with the earthy scent of pine needles. This wasn't just about winning a petty battle over birdseed. This was about reclaiming my right to enjoy nature, to celebrate the simple joys of birdwatching, to create a haven for my feathered friends, free from the suffocating grip of suburban conformity. This was about, well, it was about buying a forest. And, as any self-respecting bird lover would agree, that's a pretty darn good start to a story with a happy ending. Or at least, a very, very funny one. So, there I was, a middle-aged woman on a mission to purchase a forest. It wasn't exactly a typical Tuesday afternoon activity. The real estate agent, bless his bewildered heart, looked like he'd seen a ghost, or perhaps a particularly large flock of brightly colored parrots. He kept glancing at his clipboard, then at me, then back at his clipboard, as if trying to decipher some ancient hieroglyphs. "A forest," he repeated, his voice a mixture of disbelief and mild panic. "You're sure about this?" The paperwork, naturally, was a nightmare. Forms that stretched for miles, legal jargon that would make a lawyer's head spin, and enough fine print to wallpaper a small country. I spent hours wrestling with clauses concerning timber rights, easement agreements, and the precise definition of deciduous woodland. At one point, I even had to consult a botanist to determine whether a particular species of oak tree was classified as native or non-native. It was absurd, of course, but I persevered, fueled by a potent cocktail of caffeine, sheer stubbornness, and a burning desire to teach those HOA busybodies a lesson. Negotiations were interesting. The seller, a kindly old gentleman with a surprisingly dry wit, seemed amused by the whole situation. He kept asking if I planned to build a castle in the woods, or perhaps train a small army of squirrels. I assured him my plans were far more modest, mostly involving bird feeders, strategically placed throughout the forest, of course, and a comfortable viewing platform from which to observe my feathered friends in their natural habitat. Finally, after weeks of paperwork, negotiations, and several near-nervous breakdowns, the deal was done. I was the proud owner of a forest that, incidentally, completely overshadowed my tiny little house and its absurdly restrictive HOA bylaws. The battle was far from over, but I had just played my trump card. And it was a very, very leafy one. With the forest secured, the real fun began. Phase 1 of Operation Bird Bomb was, naturally, the acquisition of birds. Now, I'm not talking about casually buying a few bags of birdseed from the local pet store. Oh no, this required a more strategic approach. First, I consulted ornithologists, wildlife experts, and a surprisingly helpful group of bird enthusiasts on a rather obscure online forum. Their advice was invaluable, if slightly eccentric. One suggested I try communicating with the birds telepathically. Another recommended serenading them with opera. I opted for the slightly less esoteric route of contacting several reputable bird sanctuaries. The logistics were, shall we say, challenging. Transporting hundreds of birds across town required a fleet of meticulously cleaned, climate-controlled vans. It also involved a lot of paperwork, several near misses with surprisingly aggressive squirrels, and a considerable amount of bird droppings in the back of my car. Let's just say, I made a few new friends at the local car wash. At one point, I considered hiring a professional bird wrangler, but the cost was prohibitive. Besides, where would I find a professional bird wrangler? It turns out, it's not a particularly common profession. My meticulous planning extended beyond the birds themselves. I spent weeks designing and constructing an elaborate network of bird feeders, strategically placed throughout the forest, each one a masterpiece of avian architecture. I also created several comfortable observation points, complete with binoculars, comfy chairs, and a thermos of exceptionally strong coffee. I even installed a state-of-the-art bird-watching camera system, so I could monitor my feathered friends from the comfort of my own home. It was, in short, the ultimate bird-watching paradise. And it was all designed with one thing in mind: a spectacular, feather-filled, overwhelmingly avian display of glorious, bird-brained, beautiful revenge. Then came Kevin. Kevin the peacock. Oh, Kevin. Where do I even begin? Let's just say he wasn't your average garden variety bird. He arrived not with a chirp or a tweet, but with a dramatic flourish, a flamboyant entrance worthy of a Broadway show. Picture this: a custom-built birdcage, larger than my car, being carefully maneuvered through the woods by a team of burly men who looked like they'd rather be wrestling alligators. Inside, resplendent in all his iridescent glory, sat Kevin, the undisputed king of the avian world. He surveyed his new domain with an air of regal indifference, his magnificent tail feathers shimmering in the sunlight. He looked, frankly, like a feathered rock star, and I, his devoted groupie, was utterly smitten. The sheer audacity of his presence was breathtaking. He was magnificent, breathtakingly arrogant, and utterly perfect for the role. He was, in essence, the feathered embodiment of my simmering resentment. His arrival caused quite a stir among the other birds. The sparrows chirped nervously, the robins stared in awe, and the blue jays seemed to simultaneously bow and scoff. Kevin, however, remained unfazed, preening his feathers with an almost theatrical air of self-importance. He strutted around like he owned the place, which, let's be honest, he kind of did. He surveyed his new kingdom with a critical eye, occasionally unleashing a loud, almost comical squawk that echoed through the trees. It was the perfect soundtrack to my meticulously planned revenge. This wasn't just about birds. This was about a statement. A bold, flamboyant, feather-ruffling statement. And Kevin, my magnificent peacock, was the perfect feathered exclamation point. The arrival of Kevin marked the beginning of the end for the HOA's reign of terror. Or so I hoped. The day arrived. The sun shone brightly, the birds chirped merrily, and I, armed with a thermos of celebratory champagne, prepared to unleash avian chaos upon the unsuspecting HOA. The moment was surreal. Hundreds of birds, a kaleidoscope of feathers and chirps, filled the forest, a living, breathing rainbow of defiance. Kevin, of course, took center stage, his magnificent tail feathers fully extended, a glorious peacock throne amidst a sea of fluttering wings. It was a spectacular sight. A wave of feathered fury, a vibrant explosion of color and sound, a breathtaking display of natural beauty that completely overwhelmed the sterile, manicured lawns of the neighborhood. From my vantage point, I watched as the birds took flight, a swirling vortex of wings and feathers, a majestic ballet of nature's own making. It was, quite simply, glorious. And then I saw them. the HOA members. They emerged from their perfectly manicured homes, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and utter bewilderment. They looked like they'd stumbled onto a scene from a particularly bizarre nature documentary. Their neatly pressed clothes were ruffled by the wind, their perfectly coiffed hair slightly askew. One woman, bless her heart, actually gasped. Another clutched her pearls. I couldn't help but smile. It was, after all, exactly the reaction I'd hoped for. Their carefully constructed world of rules and regulations had been utterly, gloriously, and hilariously disrupted by a flock of birds. It was a symphony of feathered rebellion, a testament to the power of nature, and a resounding victory for bird lovers everywhere. A victory, I might add, that was best enjoyed with a glass of bubbly. And then the chaos began. It wasn't just a few birds. It was a full-blown avian invasion. The meticulously manicured lawns, once symbols of order and conformity, were transformed into a chaotic landscape of feathers, bird droppings, and bewildered HOA members. Birds were everywhere. Perched on meticulously pruned hedges, flitting through perfectly aligned flower beds, and even, dare I say it, taking a rather enthusiastic bath in the HOA president's prize-winning petunias. The scene was utterly glorious. Imagine a Hitchcockian thriller, but instead of terrifying suspense, it was filled with vibrant colors, cheerful chirping, and the occasional squawk of indignant outrage from a particularly disgruntled blue jay. The meticulously planned landscaping was completely obliterated. Perfectly symmetrical bushes were adorned with birds, their branches bending under the weight of 100 feathered invaders. Statues were covered in bird droppings, garden gnomes were pecked, and the HOA president's prized rose bushes were now bird-nesting havens. The HOA members, normally so focused on maintaining order and uniformity, were running around like chickens with their heads cut off, trying desperately to restore some semblance of control to their bird-ravaged paradise. Their faces were priceless, a hilarious blend of horror and helplessness. One man attempted to shoo away a particularly cheeky robin from his pristine lawnmower, only to have it perch on his head and serenade him with a rather unflattering series of chirps. It was a beautiful, chaotic, and utterly satisfying spectacle. The birds, it seemed, had won. At least for now. The war was far from over, but the first major battle had been decisively won, thanks to a forest, a flock of birds, and one very determined woman with a penchant for revenge. Of course, the HOA president, let's call her Karen, wasn't going to take this lying down. Karen, with her perfectly coiffed hair and even more perfectly pressed pantsuit, was apoplectic. She resembled a furious hummingbird, flitting from one bird-bombed lawn to another, her face a mask of simmering rage. Her attempts to restore order were, shall we say, less than successful. She tried shooing the birds away, waving her arms like a frantic conductor leading a disastrous orchestra. She even attempted to vacuum up the bird droppings, a task that proved both futile and incredibly messy. Her phone calls to the city council, the animal control, and even, I suspect, the President of the United States, were equally fruitless. Every attempt to restore her perfectly manicured world to its former glory only seemed to attract more birds. It was as if the birds were mocking her, taunting her with their cheerful chirps and vibrant feathers. The more she fussed and fretted, the more chaotic the situation became. From my vantage point, sipping my champagne, I observed Karen's frantic efforts with a mixture of amusement and satisfaction. It was a sight to behold, a testament to the power of nature's gentle, feathered rebellion against the tyranny of perfectly aligned hedges and meticulously raked gravel paths. Her fury was epic, her attempts at control utterly futile. It was, in a word, poetic justice. The birds, it seemed, had a sense of humor, and they were using it to its full, feathered advantage. And I, of course, was enjoying every minute of it. The sight of Karen, the queen of the HOA, utterly defeated by a flock of birds, was truly a sight to behold. The surrender came, not with a bang, but with a series of increasingly desperate emails. Karen, our HOA president, eventually conceded defeat. The emails, initially filled with indignant outrage, gradually devolved into a series of increasingly pathetic pleas for a ceasefire. She offered compromises, concessions, even apologies, though they were thinly veiled and laced with resentment. It was truly a spectacle. The irony, of course, wasn't lost on me. The organization that had spent months trying to control every aspect of our lives, dictating the color of our houses and the height of our hedges, had been utterly defeated by a flock of birds. The very birds they had tried to banish from our neighborhood had become the instruments of their downfall. Their meticulously crafted rules and regulations had been rendered meaningless by a simple bird feeder and a woman's unwavering determination. My victory was quiet, understated, and utterly satisfying. No grand pronouncements, no triumphant speeches, just the gentle chirping of birds and the faint sound of Karen's defeated sighs echoing through the now bird-filled neighborhood. The forest I'd bought remained, a testament to my rebellion. My bird feeder stood proudly, a symbol of defiance, surrounded by a happy chorus of feathered friends. The HOA, once a symbol of rigid control, had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the best way to deal with nature is to simply let it be. And sometimes, the best revenge is a flock of birds. A very, very large flock of birds. Life in the neighborhood settled into a new, more harmonious rhythm. The oppressive silence that once reigned, punctuated only by the whirring of lawnmowers and the rustling of perfectly pruned hedges, was replaced by a cheerful symphony of birdsong. The air vibrated with the energy of nature, a stark contrast to the previously sterile, almost clinical, atmosphere. My bird feeder, once a symbol of defiance, now stood as a beacon of peace and coexistence. The HOA, humbled and slightly less rigid, seemed to have embraced a new philosophy. Their obsession with uniformity had been replaced by a grudging acceptance of the natural world, or perhaps, a more realistic understanding of the futility of fighting against it. The meticulous lawn still existed, but now they shared space with wildflowers and the occasional bird bath. The perfectly aligned hedges were still there, but they were less pristine, a little more wild, a little more alive. Kevin, the magnificent peacock, became a neighborhood celebrity. He strutted around with an air of nonchalant superiority, his tail feathers a vibrant testament to the triumph of nature over conformity. The other birds, emboldened by their victory, seemed to have developed a certain mischievous glint in their eyes. They knew they had won. And so did I. The quiet victory was sweeter than any champagne, more satisfying than any revenge. It was the quiet joy of birdsong, the vibrant colors of a natural world allowed to flourish, the simple pleasure of peaceful coexistence. It was, in short, a new normal, and it was beautiful. The HOA, in their post-bird bomb debriefing, which I imagine involved copious amounts of chamomile tea and hushed whispers, probably learned a few valuable lessons. Firstly, and perhaps most importantly, that fighting nature is a losing battle. Trying to impose rigid control on a living, breathing ecosystem is like trying to herd cats, chaotic, frustrating, and ultimately futile. Their meticulously crafted rules, designed to create a picture-perfect, uniformly bland landscape, had inadvertently stifled the joy and vibrancy of a thriving community. Secondly, and perhaps less obvious, is the importance of respecting individual liberties. Their obsession with enforcing strict regulations, stifling even the simplest pleasures like feeding birds, had created resentment and fostered a rebellion far greater than they could have ever anticipated. The pursuit of a perfectly manicured lawn had, in the end, cost them far more than a few ruffled feathers. The irony, of course, is delicious. An organization dedicated to maintaining order and uniformity had been brought to its knees by a flock of birds and the simple act of sharing birdseed. Their story serves as a cautionary tale, a humorous reminder that sometimes the best way to create a beautiful and thriving community is to embrace the chaos, the individuality, and the beauty of the natural world around us. It's a lesson they learned the hard way, but a lesson learned nonetheless. And perhaps, just perhaps, they'll think twice before finding someone for a bird feeder again. Ironically, the bird feeder, the source of so much conflict, became the catalyst for an unexpected community. Neighbors, initially separated by the HOA's rigid rules and the silent competition for the most perfectly manicured lawn, found common ground in their shared appreciation for the birds. Early morning coffee chats now included discussions of the latest avian visitors, their plumage, and their charming antics. We shared stories, tips, and even birdseed. The previously sterile, carefully controlled environment blossomed into a vibrant hub of shared experience. Children, once confined to their own yards, now gathered around the bird feeder, their faces alight with wonder as they observed the feathered creatures up close. The quiet, almost furtive observations transformed into excited whispers and shared laughter. The bird feeder became a focal point, a gathering place, a symbol of unity. It wasn't just about the birds, of course. It was about the shared experience, the shared joy of witnessing the beauty of nature, the shared defiance of oppressive rules. We had bonded over our shared rebellion, creating a community stronger and more vibrant than any HOA could ever hope to engineer. The laughter, the shared moments of wonder, the simple pleasure of observing nature together, these were the unexpected gifts that emerged from the ashes of the HOA conflict. These were the true treasures, far more valuable than any perfectly aligned hedge or perfectly manicured lawn. These were the unexpected joys of an unexpected community. The contrast between the rigid, controlled world the HOA attempted to create and the vibrant, chaotic beauty of nature couldn't have been more stark. Their rules, their regulations, their obsession with uniformity, all felt so small, so insignificant, when compared to the sheer power and resilience of nature. The birds, the trees, the wildflowers, they existed outside their carefully constructed framework, a testament to the enduring strength of the natural world. The joy that nature brought was undeniable. The simple act of watching birds flitting among the branches, the vibrant colors of their feathers, the melodic symphony of their songs, these were experiences far more enriching than any perfectly manicured lawn could ever be. And this joy wasn't just mine. It was shared by my neighbors, by the children who gathered around the bird feeder, by anyone who took a moment to appreciate the beauty surrounding them. It was a reminder that true community isn't built on rigid rules and regulations, but on shared experiences, shared joy, and a shared appreciation for the wonders of the natural world. The birds, in their own way, had shown us the power of nature to bring people together, to foster a sense of peace and belonging, to remind us of the simple joys that often get overlooked in the pursuit of a perfectly ordered life. The power of nature, it turned out, was far greater than the power of any HOA. It was the power of life, of beauty, of community, and it was breathtaking. Looking back, the whole bird feeder saga seems almost surreal. A seemingly insignificant act of defiance, feeding birds, escalated into a full-blown war against an overly zealous HOA. It was a David and Goliath story, except David had a flock of birds and a healthy dose of stubbornness, and Goliath, well, Goliath had a meticulously manicured lawn and a penchant for rules. The point is, it's important to stand up for what you believe in, even when the odds seem stacked against you. It's easy to succumb to pressure, to follow the rules, even when those rules are unreasonable or downright silly. But sometimes, a little bit of rebellion, a little bit of chaos, is exactly what's needed to shake things up and remind everyone that there's more to life than perfectly aligned hedges. My battle with the HOA wasn't just about a bird feeder. It was about the right to enjoy the simple pleasures of life, to connect with nature, and to live without the constant fear of a fine. It was about challenging authority when that authority becomes oppressive and unreasonable. And while I wouldn't recommend buying a forest to spite your HOA as a first resort, I will say that sometimes a little bit of well-planned, bird-related mayhem can be incredibly liberating. It's a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, even if it involves a few hundred birds, a bottle of champagne, and a very bewildered HOA president. The birds, after all, had the last laugh. And so did I. So, there you have it, the epic tale of the bird feeder, the HOA, and the unexpected community that blossomed from a shared love of birds and a healthy dose of rebellion. It's a story about finding joy in unexpected places, about the power of nature to bring people together, and about the importance of standing up for what you believe in, even if it means unleashing a flock of birds on your perfectly manicured neighborhood. Remember Kevin the peacock? He became a symbol, a feathered flag of defiance waving proudly against the backdrop of perfectly aligned hedges. He, along with the rest of the avian residents, taught us a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the most beautiful things in life are a little bit messy, a little bit chaotic, and a whole lot of fun. Let this story be a reminder to embrace the unexpected, to find joy in the simple things, and to appreciate the beauty of nature, even, or especially, when it throws a little bit of chaos into your perfectly ordered life. Cherish the moments of shared laughter, the unexpected friendships, and the simple pleasure of watching birds flitting about. After all, life's too short to be constantly worried about perfectly aligned hedges. And who knows, you might even find yourself making friends with a magnificent peacock along the way. Happy bird watching!